United States. The United States got to taste a bit of its own medicine at the end of the year. On December 23, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announced that a Holstein cow in the state of Washington had tested positive for BSE. Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan immediately announced suspension of U.S. beef imports. The beef industry in the United States is about $175 billion, or nearly 10 times the size of Canada's. As always, context is key. The industry is only around 1.5% of GDP in the United States, as opposed to over 2% for Canada. Once again, large restaurant chains felt the immediate impact of the announcement. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Ann Veneman said at the time that the cow in question was a downer animal and non-ambulatory. Unfortunately, only a fraction of these unable to walk animals were being tested for the disease. At that time I wrote in my daily client commentary, the Bush update without sounding too churlish, is it smart to eat a non-ambulatory cow, whether it appears healthy or not? Immediately, McDonald's fell 3.7%, Wendy's fell 2.3%, Outback Steakhouse fell 2%, and Lone Star Steakhouse and Saloon Inc. fell 7.9%. Producers also felt the pain, with the world's largest, Tyson Foods, falling around 10%. Live cattle generic contract had the biggest move, dropping from 0.90 cents to below 0.74 cents at the beginning of January. It was a tough break for the $27 billion a year cattle industry, which had recovered from the UK and Canadian setbacks due to the popularity of the Atkins diet plan. Also note, the bigger indexes did not react much to the news, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 reacting with a margin move down. Just to show how imperfect information was at the time, market commentary suggested that Canada would benefit from increased exports to the Far East after the U.S. beef was banned. It wasn't known until December 29 that the cow in Washington state was imported from Canada. Here's how I summed up the situation on December 29, encapsulating the mood at the time. The one thing you can be certain of is heavier federal regulations on the industry. As an indication, check out this flip-flop on the issue. 44. Infectious diseases. From a Texas Democrat and rancher, Rep. Charles W. Stenholm, who fought a ban on using sick or injured cows for meat by saying, "The picture the gentleman is showing, that sick animal, will never find its way into the food chain. Period." Now he says, we need to be able to instantaneously track the history of a sick animal, and also said he was ready to work on ways to keep sick animals out of the food system, according to the New York Times of December 28, 2003. According to the article, only 200,000 or so of the 104 million cattle in the U.S. are downers, suggesting that the industry may have to take a disproportionate risk in continuing to sell meat from this group. Ouch. It'll be interesting to see how the Texan president walks a fine line between angering his cattlemen friends and not doing enough quickly enough to satisfy the fears of consumers. Or of foreign markets, as Japan said it won't lift a ban on U.S. beef imports until it is satisfied the U.S. has put in place measures to ensure its meat is free of mad cow disease. Like the South Park movie, Americans can blame Canada for their woes, but bombing the Baldwins is not going to fix the problem. Granted, at this point I don't expect the massive destruction of herds like in the UK, but none of this is good for the industry or the US dollar. Yet again, the paradigm for the outbreaks in the United Kingdom and Canada held true. The prices for live cattle, McDonald's, Tyson, and others recovered. The larger trends that were in place prior to the disease outbreak either continued or were reinforced by subsequent actions by central banks. As an example, the U.S. dollar fell more on December 24 than on December 23, the day of the BSE announcement, after an exceptionally weak durable goods number led analysts to believe the FOMC would keep interest rates unchanged. Wrap up. From the three major outbreaks of BSE, we can glean some general rules to follow. First, if the outbreak is a new disease, the impact will generally be larger in terms of reactions and panic. Second, the relative size of the industry to the country is important. The larger the percentage of GDP the industry is, the larger the initial reaction will be in all the financial instruments. Third, there will be confusion and lack of information on the subject, with the potential for misunderstandings and incorrect policy. Fourth, the time lapse between the outbreaks in the United Kingdom and Canada allowed for governments to make changes to their policies to mad cow disease. 45. Attack the problem and lessen the potential outbreak. Elimination of ruminants into the cattle food supply for protein supplements appears to have done the job for reducing risk of BSE. In other words, the first occurrence of a disease will have the largest impact. Subsequent outbreaks will have less impact and have a shorter duration. Lastly, the initial market reactions were panic selling of those areas in the economy that were deemed to be impacted by the outbreak. The reactions were short-lived and did present opportunities for profit. The medium-term opportunities stemmed from this activity. The larger trends for interest rates and economic activity played a stronger role influencing asset prices than did the outbreaks. This provided an opportunity to buy low and sell high later on after the panic stopped. CHAPTER 4. Severe acute respiratory syndrome. SARS. At the beginning of 2003, I was still doing my political talk show Politics and Money for WebFN in Chicago. Here were the opening questions for the guests on January 8. Are the tax cuts just for the rich or to boost the economy? Do the Democrats have anything better? What's worse, a dictator with nuclear weapons, North Korea, or a dictator with biological weapons, Iraq? President Bush was proposing a stimulus plan to cut taxes and boost spending by $675 billion over 10 years. The bigger-than-expected plan was going to move forward tax cuts for 2004 and 2006, eliminate the double taxation of dividends, and provide incentives for companies to boost investment in equipment. Some pundits said that the dividend tax cut alone would generate a 20% increase in stock prices. This was going to be cheered by a rookie administration official in the Council of Economic Advisers R. Glenn Hubbard in the U.S. Treasury John Snow and in the Senate Majority Leader position Bill Frist. At the time, Senate Minority Leader Tom Daschle said, "This plan is obscene." The debate was going to be about increasing the size of the deficit versus risking another recession. Little did they know that the U.S. economy would need this stimulus along with U.S. interest rates remaining at 1% for an entire year to revive a moribund economy. At the same time, North Korea was announcing that it was pulling out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which it had been a party since 1985. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is being used as a tool for implanting the 48 infectious diseases. Hostile U.S. policy toward North Korea aimed to disarm it and destroy its system by force, according to Pyongyang. Assistant Secretary of State James Kelly said, according to Reuters, "We are of course willing to talk. Get beyond nuclear weapons, there may be opportunities with the U.S., with private investors, and with other countries to help North Korea in the energy area." The U.S. response was cool and calculated, unlike its handling of the Iraq situation. However, the lack of results has continued to plague relations in the region. North Korea would shake up the world with a missile test before the end of March. However, the key area of geopolitical focus was Iraq and UN weapon inspections led by Hans Blix and Mohammed el-Baradei. The UN and Iraq were engaged in a game of hide-and-seek with banned weapons, and then Blix would report back to the UN on the progress. The two-handed reports would read like this. On the one hand, Iraq is destroying missiles, on the other hand, inspectors are not getting full cooperation. Saddam Hussein was PR crafty as ever and gave soon-to-be demoted Dan Rather a one-on-one interview. "I am ready to conduct a direct dialogue, a debate, with your president. I will say what I want and he will say what he wants. Out of my respect for the people of the United States and my respect for the people of Iraq and the people of the world. I call for this because war is no joke." Of course, he could have just done what UN Resolution 1441 requested and dismantled his Al-Samad missiles, and then he would have probably avoided a war. This situation would continue to foment into the month of March, with the United States and United Kingdom losing their patience with the UN and Saddam Hussein, and then there was the whole situation with Nigerian Yellowcake. Okay, we'll save that for a later chapter. On March 6, President Bush in a primetime news conference declared that, "We really don't need anybody's permission to defend the United States." The U.S. had gone back to the UN for one more resolution that would explicitly authorize the use of force IFIRAQW not in compliance with other UN resolutions on its weapons of mass destruction. However, prior to a vote, France and Russia made it very clear that they would veto to this type of resolution. On March 18, President Bush gave Saddam Hussein 48 hours to comply, and Homeland Security raised the terrorist alert level to orange. After 9/11, the United States had experienced an anthrax attack as well. Homeland Security was keenly focused on the potential for a biological or nuclear attack. Some critics would eventually say that the agency stepped on civil rights in its pursuit of terrorists and protecting the United States. However, this seemed to be the right thing to do as other countries and allies were experiencing the exact trouble that the United States wanted to avoid. Raids on a London apartment found the super-toxic ricin in the severe acute respiratory syndrome (SARS). 49. Midst of terrorists. In January, a British police officer was killed in a Manchester raid on suspected terrorists. UK Prime Minister Tony Blair had these sobering and foreshadowing words, according to Reuters: "We could spend billions of pounds doing it, war on terror, we could spend tens of billions of pounds. And we could still not identify where the attack actually is going to come. There are no limits to the potential threats which you could imagine." This was the heightened state of geopolitics and domestic politics at the end of March. The heightened uncertainty was creating highly volatile markets in equities, bonds, currencies, and commodities. This frenzied mindset contributed to what occurred with SARS, as markets were juiced with the impending thought of an invasion. Here's what I wrote on Monday, March 17. For the financial markets, here's what I see: the dollar is not reacting as negatively as one would think given the immediacy of the war. Gold is now over $45 below its peak, the Dow is still 500 points above its October 2002 low, and oil is almost $3 below its highs. Little did the world or I know that another type of terror was lurking and already killing in the lead up to the Iraq War. This time, the trouble would come from the Far East and an all-out medical war would ensue. Disease dynamics. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) fact sheet www.cdc.gov/ncdad/sars/factsheet.htm, severe acute respiratory syndrome (SARS) is severe respiratory illness caused by a coronavirus called SARS-associated coronavirus (SARS-CoV). SARS was first reported in Asia in February 2003. According to the World Health Organization (WHO), a total of 8,098 people worldwide became sick with SARS during the 2003 outbreak. Of these, 774 died. In the United States, only 8 people had laboratory evidence of SARS-CoV infection. All of these people had traveled to other parts of the world where SARS had occurred. The symptoms of the disease are quite similar to those of influenza. There is a high fever that is generally greater than 100.4 F. The usual discomforts of body aches and headache are also associated with disease. About 10% to 20% of patients shave diarrhea. After 2 to 7 days, SARS patients may develop a dry cough. The incubation period is from 2 to 10 days. Just like patients with influenza, most SARS patients develop pneumonia, and this is what ravages their lungs and ultimately kills them. As mentioned in Chapter 2 on Spanish flu, one of the major differences between influenza and SARS is the emitting of a fever as an identifier. 50. Infectious diseases. Of infection. Eventually, this characteristic allowed medical professionals to be able to identify and finally quarantine SARS patients. Unlike influenza, which is airborne, SARS is spread by person-to-person contact or close proximity with someone infected, as in an elevator or an airplane. This underscores why quarantine was an effective tool against the disease. How ironic that a medical technique that was developed during the Black Death is still an effective tool. The CDC defines close contact as shaving, cared for, or lived with someone with SARS, or having direct contact with respiratory secretions or body fluids of a patient with SARS. Examples of close contact include kissing or hugging, sharing eating or drinking utensils, talking to someone within 3 feet, and touching someone directly. This is why during the height of the crisis Asians were avoided by Westerners. The stigma of the disease caused fear of any contact with someone from that region. According to the CDC, the virus that causes SARS is thought to be transmitted most readily by respiratory droplets. Droplet spread produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes. The CDC's assessment states, droplet spread can happen when droplets from the cough or sneeze of an infected person are propelled a short distance, generally up to 3 feet, through the air and deposited on the mucous membranes of the mouth, nose, or eyes of persons who are nearby. The virus also can spread when a person touches a surface or object contaminated with infectious droplets and then touches his or her mouth, nose, or eyes. In addition, it is possible that the SARS virus might spread more broadly through the air, airborne spread, or by other ways that are not now known. Of course, this is what is known now after 3 years of analysis by the World Health Organization, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and other health agencies from around the world. In 2003, there was uncertainty and panic over a disease that was spreading rapidly and was killing the very people who sought to cure it. If the disease was similar to influenza and could spread rapidly via airborne particles, it could have tremendous killing power. It would also mean that one way to combat the disease would be quarantines and limiting travel to regions containing the disease. Like the 1918 influenza and the recent mad cow disease, the lack of accurate and complete information relating to SARS as it spread would ultimately cause more damage than the disease itself to financial markets and the population. Try to keep in mind that people were dying, the disease was spreading, and no one understood how to stop it. Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, SARS. 51. The SARS timeline. To understand the SARS phenomenon and its impact on the financial markets, you need to know the timelines involved with the spread of the disease from China to other parts of the region and world. It is also critical to understand the role that the World Health Organization (WHO) played in creating chaos and confusion by issuing something it had never done before: travel advisories. Let's look at the sequence of SARS-related events that transpired in 2003. This list, Table 4.1, essentially comes from the WHO website, with my modifications for emphasis. This is a fantastic learning opportunity to show how disease events unfold sequentially, how nonlinear those events can be, and how they impact the financial markets. This chapter has a slightly different feel to it than the first two chapters, as we are examining a modern disease outbreak during the age of the internet and dramatically faster information flow. This condenses and intensifies the reactions. SARS hindsight is 2020. This chronology of SARS shows that its impact was over a limited duration as the disease was quickly contained due to massive international cooperation. However, there were several lessons to take away from the outbreak. First, fear and panic generate lots of volatility in the financial markets where the outbreaks are occurring. This means there are opportunities to take advantage of the fear factor. The bigger moves happen in the smaller markets or in the markets that are specifically impacted. This is why I focused on the Singapore dollar and companies like Shangri-La and Cathay Pacific. Singapore is a small island nation with a currency that is somewhat thinly traded. South Korea is a bigger country with a larger economy, but with similar characteristics. Japan has a large economy, but was still impacted by the region's exposure to the disease. Shangri-La was a hotel company that would have been expected to lose business as customers cancelled reservations at its hotels in the region. Other major hotel chains like Starwood and Hilton experienced similar problems, but not to the extent of an entity at the epicenter of the outbreak. Cathay Pacific felt the same negative wave hit its business and its stock. The drop in the airline's stock price was even more eye-popping as the price of oil dropped and still couldn't stem the selling that ensued due to SARS. Notice, all the major airline stock prices in the world fell as well. Air France, Lufthansa, British Airways, United Airlines, Continental Airlines. 52. Infectious diseases. Table 4.1 The SARS timeline. Date. Event. 16 November 2002. First known case of atypical pneumonia occurs in Foshan City, Guangdong Province, China, but is not identified until much later. The 10th of February 2003. The 11th of February. The 12th of February. The 14th of February. The 17th of February. The 19th of February. The WHO Beijing office receives an email message describing a strange contagious disease that has already left more than 100 people dead in Guangdong Province in the space of 1 week. The message further describes a panic attitude currently where people are emptying pharmaceutical stocks of any medicine they think may protect them. WHO receives reports from the Chinese Ministry of Health of an outbreak of acute respiratory syndrome with 300 cases and 5 deaths in Guangdong Province. Health officials from Guangdong Province report a total of 305 cases and 5 deaths of acute respiratory syndrome. The cases and deaths occurred from the 16th of November 2002 to the 9th of February 2003. Laboratory analyses are negative for influenza viruses. The Chinese Ministry of Health informs WHO that the outbreak in Guangdong Province is clinically consistent with atypical pneumonia. The outbreak is said to be coming under control. The containment was clearly proven incorrect. This helps frame the problem of opaque communication on the disease. This was the first experience of an epidemic for many in the medical community in China and in the rest of the world. The first reaction was to deny there was a problem. This eventually led to a bigger outbreak and larger complications. A 33-year-old Hong Kong man, who had traveled with his family to Fujian Province, China, in January, dies of unknown causes in Hong Kong. His 8-year-old daughter died previously, of unknown causes, while in mainland China. His 9-year-old son is hospitalized. An outbreak of bird flu in Hong Kong is reported to WHO following the detection of the influenza A H5N1 virus in the 9-year-old boy. WHO activates its global influenza laboratory network and calls for heightened global surveillance. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. 53. Table 4.1 continued. Date. Event. The 20th of February, the Department of Health in Hong Kong confirms that the boy's father was likewise infected with a strain of the influenza A H5N1 virus. This was a red herring and took authorities down another blind alley that would further lengthen the time before SARS was understood. The 21st of February, a 64-year-old medical doctor from Zhongshan University in Guangzhou, Guangdong Province, arrives in Hong Kong to attend a wedding. He checks into the 9th floor of the Metropole Hotel, room 911. Although he had developed respiratory symptoms 5 days earlier, he feels well enough to sightsee and shop with his 53-year-old brother-in-law, who resides in Hong Kong. This turned out to be the typhoid Mary of SARS, as other visitors staying at the hotel left and traveled to other parts of the world, spreading the disease. It also provided a link to hotels and the fear that staying there could expose someone to the disease. Companies that owned and operated hotels in the area saw their stock prices decline quickly. Shangri-La Asia Limited is a good example, as its price would decline close to 30% from February through the end of April. See Figure 4.1. The 22nd of February, the Guangdong doctor seeks urgent care at the Kwong Wah Hospital in Hong Kong and is admitted to the intensive care unit with respiratory failure. He had previously treated patients with atypical pneumonia in Guangdong. He warns medical staff that he fears he has contracted a very virulent disease. Health. Authorities in Hong Kong learned that his symptoms developed on the 15th of February, at which point he would have still been on the Chinese mainland. The 23rd of February, a 78-year-old female tourist from Toronto, Canada, checks out of the Metropole Hotel and begins her homeward journey. On arrival in Toronto, she is reunited with her family. The 24th of February, the Global Public Health Intelligence Network (GPHIN) picks up a report stating that over 50 hospital staff are infected with a mysterious pneumonia in the city of Guangzhou. In Hong Kong, a 26-year-old local man develops a respiratory tract infection but does not seek medical attention. From 15 to the 23rd of February, he had visited an acquaintance staying on the 9th floor of the Metropole Hotel. The 25th of February, the brother-in-law of the Guangdong doctor is admitted to Kwong Wah Hospital and discharged. Continues. 54. Infectious diseases. Table 4.1 continued. Date. Event. The 26th of February, a 48-year-old Chinese-American businessman is admitted to the French hospital in Hanoi with a 3-day history of fever and respiratory symptoms. His recent travel history includes a January trip to Shanghai, and a private trip from 8 to the 10th of February to Guangdong Province and Macau. He traveled to Hong Kong on the 17th of February, departed for Hanoi on the 23rd of February, and fell ill there. Shortly before his departure from Hong Kong, he had stayed on the 9th floor of the Metropole Hotel in a room across the hall from the Guangdong doctor. The businessman is attended by a WHO official, Drive. Carlo Urbani, based in Vietnam. The 28th of February, Drive. Urbani, alarmed by the unusual disease and concerned it might be a case of avian influenza, notifies the WHO office in Manila. WHO headquarters moves into a heightened state of alert. The 1st of March. The brother-in-law of the Guangdong doctor is readmitted to Kwong Wah Hospital. A 26-year-old woman is admitted to a hospital in Singapore with respiratory symptoms. A resident of Singapore, she was a guest on the 9th floor of the Hotel Metropole in Hong Kong from 21 to the 25th of February. The 4th of March. The 5th of March. The 7th of March. The 8th of March. The Guangdong doctor dies of atypical pneumonia at Kwong Wah Hospital. In Hanoi, the Chinese-American businessman, in a stable but critical condition, is air medevaced to the Princess Margaret Hospital in Hong Kong. 7 healthcare workers who had cared for him in Hanoi become ill. Dr. Urbani continues to help hospital staff contain further spread. The 78-year-old Toronto woman dies at Toronto's Scarborough Grace Hospital. 5 members of her family are found to be infected and are admitted to the hospital. The Canadian dollar broke its rally against the US dollar for a 2-week retracement of the trend. As we know, the U.S. Federal Reserve was in the process of cutting the federal funds target rate to the lowest levels since World War II. At the time of the outbreak, the Fed funds rate was at 1.25%. It would be cut again to 1.00% in late June. See Figure 4.2. Healthcare workers at Hong Kong's Prince of Wales Hospital start to complain of respiratory tract infection progressing to pneumonia. All have an identifiable link with Ward 8A. In Taiwan, a 54-year-old businessman with a travel history to Guangdong province is hospitalized with respiratory symptoms. Severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. 55. Table 4.1 continued. Date. Event. The 10th of March, at least 22 staff at the Hanoi hospital are ill with influenza-like symptoms. 20 show signs of pneumonia, 1 requires breathing support, and another is in critical condition. The Ministry of Health in China asks WHO to provide technical and laboratory support to clarify the cause of the Guangdong outbreak of atypical pneumonia. The 11th of March, Drive. Urbani departs for Bangkok, on a Thai flight, where he is scheduled to give a presentation at a meeting on tropical diseases the following day. He is ill upon arrival and is immediately hospitalized. The 12th of March, WHO issues a global alert about cases of severe atypical pneumonia following mounting reports of spread among staff at hospitals in Hong Kong and Hanoi. This alert essentially signaled to the financial markets that there was a problem. Markets reacted by selling Far Eastern currencies such as the Singapore dollar, the South Korean won, and the Japanese yen. See figures 4.3 to 4.5. The US dollar gained at this time as optimism over a short war kicked in as well. The 13th of March, the Ministry of Health in Singapore reports 3 cases of atypical pneumonia in young women who had recently returned to Singapore after traveling to Hong Kong. All had stayed on the 9th floor of the Metropole Hotel in late February. The 44-year-old son of Toronto's first case dies in Scarborough Grace Hospital. The 14th of March, in Hong Kong, 39 staff at 3 hospitals undergo treatment for flu-like symptoms. 24 exhibit signs of pneumonia and are described as in serious condition. Health authorities in Ontario, Canada, take steps to alert doctors, hospitals, ambulance services, and public health units across the province that there are 4 cases of atypical pneumonia in Toronto that have resulted in 2 deaths. All occurred within a single family. The 15th of March, at 2 a.m., Singapore health authorities notify WHO staff, by urgent telecommunication, that a 32-year-old physician, who had treated the country's first 2 SARS cases, had boarded a flight from New York City to Singapore, after having attended a medical conference to return to Singapore via Frankfurt. Shortly before boarding the flight, he had reported symptoms to an alert medical colleague in Singapore, who notified health officials. WHO identifies the airline and flight, and the physician, along with his 30-year-old pregnant wife and 62-year-old mother-in-law, are removed from the flight in Frankfurt and placed in isolation. They become Germany's first SARS cases. Continues. 56. Infectious diseases. Table 4.1 continued. Date. Event. WHO issues a rare travel advisory as evidence mounts that SARS is spreading by air travel along international routes. WHO names the mysterious illness after its symptoms, severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, and declares it a worldwide health threat. WHO issues its first case definitions of suspect and probable cases of SARS. WHO further calls on all travelers to be aware of the signs and symptoms, and issues advice to airlines. Health Canada reports 8 cases of atypical pneumonia, including the 2 deaths. 4 intensive care specialists arrive in Hanoi to reinforce the Global Outbreak Alert and Response Network (GOARN) team there. The Singapore Ministry of Health reports 16 cases of atypical pneumonia. This highlights the role that air travel played in spreading the disease.